Hi, Canon Collective. Welcome to this Clique feature. With this Clique feature, I've got photographer David Stowe and I've also got photographer Darren Dew. David, firstly, how are you going?
Very well, thanks, mate. How are you?
Very good. Darren, how are you going?
I'm excellent too. I'm really looking forward to having a chance to hear what David's got to say about bird photography, because it's something I really need to improve.
Yeah, mate, thank you for taking the time to join us, and hopefully we're going to pick your brain and get a little bit of your knowledge, because you take some amazing bird pictures, and we've got a lot of people in the collective who love their wildlife and particularly birds. And with the Clique Awards coming up, there's a category there basically around wildlife and animals. So firstly, if you just give us a little bit of a background about you and your photography, and then we might talk briefly about your gear as well.
Yeah, so I've been a professional photographer for over 25 years now. I actually started in weddings and portraits, and that's sort of still my main bread and butter. But I probably, about 2000, 2002, something like that, got into bird photography and a bit more wildlife. And yeah, it's been a passion that I've then turned into a bit of a business with Flock Wildlife Tours, running workshops and tours and giving sort of personal instruction on how to take better bird photos. So, yeah.
So, David, in the Clique Awards, there's actually two streams. There's actually a process stream and there's an edited stream. How much do you do with your images? How much of it's processed and how much do you have to do editing on your actual image?
Yeah, it depends on the image itself and probably also the competition I'm entering. You know, one of the things when you're shooting and looking for images to enter into an awards is you're choosing an image, obviously, that fits the criteria. So, you know, making sure that you're not trying to mislead people and over edit something and enter it into the, you know, the non-edited, you know, process sort of category. I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, I try not to do too much for that reason, because generally if it's going to enter into competition, most wildlife photography competitions like Australian Geographic and Natural History Museum, all those things, they don't allow any substantial, you know, modification to the image beyond, you know, tonal adjustments, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, keeping it as natural in camera as possible as you can is great. For my own personal work, yeah, there's definitely times when I'll, you know, might clone out the odd thing here or there. And I personally don't think there's any shame in that. It's just, again, about transparency. You know, it's about following the rules and not lying about it, you know, just being upfront about how you get stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like you celebrating both, you know. That's the thing. It's there's skill involved in both areas, and as you said, David, it's that idea that that people know what they're looking at. That's right.
Yeah, there's nothing more saddening, I think, than people trying to you know, I've seen it on Facebook groups, you know, there's photo of an owl and people are saying, oh, this serendipitous moment where the owl landed on this perch, and it's like, oh, that's Elmo from the desert park at Alice Springs, you know. So there's no point trying to mislead people, because typically, you know, especially bird photography communities, relatively small, I suppose, and you know, people know this sort of stuff, and you'll get caught out. And I think it's really sad, you know, things like the Natural History Museum Nature Photographer of the Year, you know, has been shamed by a number of times by people, you know, using stuffed anteaters in winning images and things like that, and just going to any lengths to win a competition, not just to get the shot, but just to win a competition. And yeah, I just find that really sad, because it's going to absolutely ruin your reputation, first and foremost, but it's also something you've got to live with, you know, and I just couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Darren, you can probably talk about the ethical framework which sits within the Clique Awards around the wildlife side of it.
For sure, yeah. We've decided to go with the two versions of the, let's call it, animals and plants categories. There's the wildlife and nature, which has got an ethical framework based around, you know, appropriate, respectful practices when you're shooting. It's all codified in the terms and conditions, what you can and can't do. And I think that kind of holds that nature and wildlife category in to the same spirit as some of the bigger competitions. and that involves single capture, limited processing. But then we do have the plants and animals category as well, which is designed for the sorts of things that David just mentioned, a bird in a bird show. No problem at all. A captive animal that's been trained. You might want to edit out the fence out of the background. No problem. You can put it in plants and animals, and it's got a home there, which it will be celebrated for what it is. And there's the end result is we're trying to celebrate the final image in whatever category we're judging. And so, yeah, we've created these two spaces for the two different types of photography.
I think the important thing to remember too, Darren, as you know, is even within those two frameworks, the ethical considerations are equally as important. Whether you've edited the photo, whether it's captive or whatever, you still got to look after the subject and not do anything untoward. Especially making a bird fly, like chasing a bird till it just keeps flying just to get that flight shot. That sort of stuff is just unacceptable. Clearing away foliage in front of a bird's nest is absolutely unacceptable. There's most competitions don't allow nest photography for that reason. It's not that it's not possible to get a good photo of a bird's nest without intruding on the bird, but unfortunately a lot of people just take it too far, and they do. I was reading an article last night, actually a friend sent, about bird photography in another country where it's rife for people just absolutely pruning the hell out of everything around a nest so they can get this beautiful clear photo. And of course the nest fails, but they don't care because they've got their photo and they're just only concerned with the image. And that's the big thing with wildlife photography, is you can't get into wildlife photography, or you shouldn't get into wildlife photography if you're only after the image. It should be a celebration of the animals, a celebration of the birds. It should be, trying to use your imagery to further conservation efforts, all that sort of thing. It shouldn't be just to get the photo at any cost.
Really important. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's all good. That's really good stuff for us all to think about how we go about our photography. And like I said, and like I said, but there is that opportunity within the Clique Awards for people to be able to have that latitude, like Darren said. So if you're just practicing, sometimes for people going to a bird sanctuary or some other place, is a good point for them to start practicing their photography. So there's get them on their way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
So David, just wondering how we've obviously out in the wild, it's always difficult, but when you kind of working at your composition, how do you go about it? Do you have a preconceived how you want to get a particular bird, where you want it in the frame, those types of things? Do you consider that, or is it some other process?
Yeah. No, composition is super important. And I think that's often what people forget in bird photography, is people are so focused on getting close and getting tight and just getting the bird in the middle of the frame. And certainly in the past, with a lot of cameras where, you've center focus point is the fastest, and people just, that's all they see is that just getting the bird sharp and tight. But yeah, a great bird wildlife image has the same compositional elements as any photography, and I think that's something that you just got to remember. Like, don't just fill the frame with a little bird. Think about where it's looking, give the bird space to look into or to fly into, just as you would a person. You're not going to have a person looking here and the edge of the frame's here and the edge of the frame's over here. You're always going to have them looking towards the space. So that's probably my big thing would be, just still look at the composition of the image and also the background. A lot of times, again, we're just so focused on this tiny little bird and a telephoto lens, and you think, the background's really out of focus already. But when you get it home on the computer, you realize even though it's out of focus, you've still got these tonal, changes or color changes in the background that really distract you and lead your eye into the background. So, positioning yourself a step to the left or a step to the right, to not have a branch coming out behind it, or to not have the sky patch behind the bird and you're just having a nice solid green background or whatever. Those sort of elements I think are really important to remember as well.
Yeah. That's good advice. And I think the other thing, which kind of leads me into the next point, which is one of the criteria for judging, is storytelling. And some of the points you touched on your composition there do play into storytelling. So you just give us your kind of interpretation of how you tell a story with an image?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it starts with the composition in just a visual story of letting your eye wander around the frame or leading the viewer's eye around the correct part of the frame that you want them to go to. But then if you can have the subject doing something, it's going to be much more interesting than it just sitting on a stick, So telling a part of the story of, the action, feeding, hunting, flying, whatever, I think is much more interesting than just a static sort of shot. But also not relying on, a caption to tell the story. You've got to tell the story visually. We see that a bit in competitions where they allow captions and people are telling you about something that happened that's not actually in the frame. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter, if you didn't capture it, it actually is detrimental to the image, because all you can do now is go, oh, what about that thing you mentioned that I can't see?
We've everybody, when they enter the Clique Awards, has the opportunity to put a description in there, and it's only a 25-word one, and we've limited it really just to it's really to help the judges if there is something in the picture that they haven't quite understood, or we've limited it to 25 words so it can be quite succinct and just get to the point. So
that's right. Don't try and talk up your own image. I've seen captions in competitions where the entrant is basically given like a judge's description of how your eyes led here, and it's like it's not the place for the caption, or again, telling you stuff that isn't there that you should have captured in the image. So
usually what happens, just so everybody knows, I guess what most really experienced reviewers and judges will do is they will obviously look at the image first and only rely on the description if they have to. And if they get the information they need from there, well and good. But it's not often that people would have their minds changed by a description, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
David, if I just kind of pick your brains a little bit around back to, I suppose, helping the collective get better pictures, do you spend much time studying your subjects' behaviours before you go out to understand how they might react?
Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing things like knowing a bird's habitat and when they're active, those sort of things can really help you to get a better photo. So going back to your storytelling point, I think if you have a photo of a bird in an environment that's maybe not its typical environment, that looks a bit weird, it might be on this perfect perch, but if it's not descriptive of that bird's natural habitat, then I think you've lost the opportunity to tell that part of the story. So yeah, knowing about your subject definitely helps. It makes it easy to find. It narrows down your search. If you're searching for a particular species, you're not searching the wrong place. So
and again, a lot of that information is readily available if people want to go out and seek it. I imagine there's resources out there that people can study up on if there's some bird they particularly want to try and capture, just to give themselves a bit more, I suppose, chance of actually maybe knowing the shot as well.
Yeah, look, most bird photographers would be, sort of have a field guide. I've got a bookshelf of them here full of them, but things like Australian Bird Guide, which is just a field guide, but it has just, obviously, for starters, people often don't know what they're looking at, so getting the species correct, that's the very starting point is photographing what you think is a bin chicken, but realizing that it's an Australian white ibis. Those sort of little things just help you in your knowledge, and it's good fun to read through the guide and learn more about things and just see all the pictures and help you to identify things before you've even seen them.
I think that's a good kind of avenue for people to go down. David, a lot of people, like I said, in the collective love their kind of bird photography, but what are you currently shooting with? I see a pretty impressive piece of kit behind you there.
Yeah, I've got this tiny little 500mm f4. That's my main lens. I've also shoot with a 100 to 400, but the 500 f4 with a 1.4 converter is probably the go-to lens. With birds, you really can never have enough focal length.
No.
Yeah, they're always, especially smaller birds, it's okay when you're photographing pelicans or something that's very tame, like, silver gulls or pigeons or something like that. But for a lot of small birds in Australia, that, yeah, you really need at least sort of 400 or 500 mil. So, and then the body wise, I'm currently shooting on an R5. So I went from a 1DX Mark II to an R5 when they come out, and yeah, haven't regretted it for a second. It's been a brilliant camera.
Yeah, so you're really enjoying the eye tracking capability of animals?
It is amazing, like even photographing an ibis, which has got a small black eye and a black head from a decent distance, the eye tracking will still grab the eye of an ibis, and it's just, yeah, it is absolutely amazing. It's definitely improved my hit rate for birds, and birds in flight, and just keeping the tracking on it is amazing. It also just, the ability to have the focus points right to the edge of the frame is also another massive advantage from previous cameras. I mean, the 1DX Mark II was no slouch, that's for sure, and I've got plenty of amazing shots with that camera. But yeah, just being able to compose a bit differently, and even with the flip out screen, being able to just lay the camera on the ground and flip the screen out and use the eye detect focus, so that you're not having to toggle your joystick to get your focus point on the bird quickly, that sort of thing. Yeah, it really has made bird photography particularly a lot easier for most people.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, David, have you had much experience around awards? Have you entered many awards?
Yeah, I have. A bit of inspiration from Mr. Dew over here. He was very inspirational to me with the AIPP, and I was probably only about 10 years, 9 years ago or so, I rejoined the AIPP after a big absence, and yeah, with the aim of trying to enter the awards and things. And it was a really massive boost to my photography and to my creativity and inspiration, like just seeing all these amazing photographers take great photos and being a part of the awards and pushing yourself, using that opportunity to go, okay, well, how can I get a better photo? And you're looking at all this great work and going, well, how can I do that? How can I get better? How can I win? There's definitely the competitive nature in there, which is great. And yeah, so I love the awards process. It's definitely improved my photography a lot.
Well, that's great news, because I mean, that's one of the things for the collective that we've got this group of nearly over 19,000 passionate photographers around Australia that Canon have put this group together over a period of years. And so this awards is really for them. And the idea is basically with the report card they'll get. So you could see each year that you entered, obviously you were always hoping to better your scores on your pictures. Yeah,
definitely. Awards that give you feedback are really important. Like, they're really, really helpful. Like the AIPP, like the Clique Awards, having your scorecard given back to you will be great. And I think the thing to remember though is, don't be disheartened. There's always going to be someone better than you. I'm still learning. I'm still got a lot of things I can do better, and don't get down about it if you maybe don't get the score you wanted, or if you disagree with the judges. That's another thing. We're all different. We've all got different eyes and different ways of seeing, and photography, as you know, is so subjective, and what is a gold award to someone is a nothing to someone else.
It's a good thing about the Clique Awards being that each image is seen by 3 individual reviewers or judges. Yep. So you're getting a kind of aggregation of those scores put together. So it's going to give people a pretty good indication of where they're at with their photography, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, David, look, one of the things, like I said, we're hoping to do with the Clique Awards as well is we're taking people on a bit of an educational journey to try and help them improve because like you said, that first year they might put some bird pictures in and not score too high. David, one of the areas which the judge is going to be looking for is innovation. And I know it's kind of a bit of a challenge with wildlife because they are wild and you can't, tell them where to sit. But how do you go about trying to get that shot that no one else has got? How do you kind of plan that, or what do you do to try and create that shot?
Yeah, look, it's getting harder, I suppose, to get shots that haven't been done in a lot of ways. And I think often it will come down to techniques and composition, and looking at the subject a different way, treating it a different way in post-production, for example. Different lighting scenarios, at the moment, like high key is really cool, but also really low key backlit, small on the frame is also, a bit in as well. So I think just trying, like any photography, I think that the key is with wildlife photography is treat it like any other discipline of photography. You want to be creative. It's not just, photographing something, like I said, on a stick. It's trying to get the light different, or get your composition different, get the setting different. It's just
So
trying
that
to.
could be using things like elevation, or changing your angle, getting down super low, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, any bird that's naturally on the ground, you naturally want to be at eye level with your subjects. So if you're shooting shorebirds, gulls, terns, etc., at the beach and sand spits and things, yes, you'll always try and get low to get that really nice, shallow depth of field effect, because your background can suddenly be 100 meters away. So it gets you this really nice depth to the image, but it's also a much more intimate perspective. If you just walk up to something that's on the ground and shoot down at it, not only is your depth of field, the background's right behind the bird so that you're not getting any separation from the background, but it's also just, you're just standing there. And that goes with any genre of photography. If you just walk up, shoot with a standard lens at eye height, it's always going to look the same as anyone else, whereas if you can climb a tree or, shoot up off the ground or whatever, it's always going to be more interesting. So, and if you don't have a really long lens, like not everyone's got a 500 or 600 mil lens, look for those images where the bird is smaller in the frame and you have a more bird in the landscape sort of image, and they can often be just as impactful, if not more, than, again, the tight portrait. So, don't think you've got to have a massive lens.
Certainly the storytelling aspects of those pictures where you've got a small animal in its habitat is that's where the strength of that's going to come in. So your points, if you're looking at how your image scores in those 6 judging criteria, remember that a really tight perfect portrait of a wren is going to do okay in subject, but it might not do so well in storytelling. Whereas if you've got a small wren on an angled branch, you're going to have a nice composition, and you're going to have some storytelling about the sort of habitat that animal lives in. So that's where the points go up in that area. So it's looking at how you can almost use the judging criteria as a bit of a guide to making sure that if you can get a good result in each of those criteria, you're going to do well overall. For sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're probably getting close to kind of wrapping up. I'm just wondering, have you got a piece of advice for someone who's become quite passionate about shooting birds, been out there with their, maybe they've just got their kit lens and their basic Canon body and they're kind of struggling? Is there anything you can kind of encourage them, or anything you could say to them to, or point them in a direction that they could try and build their skill set?
Yeah, I think, like you guys were saying before, Darren was saying with the captive birds, and go to the zoo, go to a free flight bird show. There's plenty around the country where you can have that practice of something, flying in, which you just won't normally get. Like at Alice Springs Desert Park, for example, they fly raptors, and you've got a hobby zooming in at 100 mile an hour, and it's an incredible experience just to have these raptors like that flying around you. But also it's a terribly difficult technical challenge to try and get them sharp, even though they're captive. So yeah, bird flight shows are great for honing your flight skills. Again, just get out there. Even photographing your pets, your dogs, will help you to think about just what it looks like when the subject's turning to this way or that way, and getting your angle right and that sort of thing. So yeah, just work within your capabilities of the camera you've got too. You know, don't just lust after a big lens all the time. Just go, okay, well, how can I get closer? How can I find subjects that are a bit more approachable?
And then to slowly build up your skill set, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think you mentioned
get a bigger lens.
And look, I think you mentioned it at the beginning about saying that you're still learning as well. So even someone of your great depth of experience, you're still learning stuff, I imagine, every time you go out.
Absolutely. There's always things to learn, whether it's about your subjects, about the gear. I mean, like even just, technical things like a new camera system, is something new to learn. There's always new software, Lightroom's always updating, DxO, Topaz, all these new software programs to get better raw conversions and things. Yeah, it just doesn't stop, it's relentless actually. And I'm getting tired,
So Darren, have you got anything you want to add to just to close?
Yeah, I think that was awesome discussion. Thanks, David. I really enjoyed it. Got a few tips out of it there myself, and I'm sure everybody's going to love hearing some of the insights into how to get better bird pictures for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, David, and thanks again, Darren, for joining us in this Clique feature. And I hope people get out there and jump in with their images. Owns on the 15th of November. So we're looking forward to seeing, and I'm sure David will be looking forward to see what type of wildlife pictures, bird pictures in particular, the collective can come up with.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.